everyone, and it's Rolly here. There won't be any photos on this week's podcast because we have a special guest coming on next week, and we want to basically put the main focus of the podcast on that next episode. So I'll be back to a normal podcast episode next week, and I'll see you back in the podcast. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Display Lane podcast. I'm your host Ollie.
And I'm your other host, Joey.
And today we're going to take you through recent news events, especially weather. We're also going to be taking you through the very lack of aircraft announcement this week and what we think was the golden age of air shows in the UK. So Joey, do you want to get us started with the Iranian news segment?
We're actually going to start with the Ukrainian news segment this week, as it's been quite the quiet news. Actually, our biggest news segment this week is probably weather news, just because of the outbreak. But starting off with the Ukrainian news, there was an Mi-17 and an Mi-28 from the Russian Air Force that were taken out by Ukrainian FPV drones over the last few days or so.
Yeah, I mean, these helicopters are rare in itself. I mean, you only really see them in Russia or sort of African countries mainly, because they're just not exported anywhere other than places like Egypt, for example. They got quite good ties with Russia. And as Joey said, they were FPV drones, which is a very common thing. There's been many jets, many sort of airliners and bombers that have been FPV drone. And it got to a point earlier in the year where Russia had to put like tires and that on all the wings of the like bombers and stuff like that. So hopefully the FPV drone would hit the tire and explode rather than hitting the actual aircraft and just exploding the whole thing. But yeah, these are quite rare helicopters, and I don't think they've ever really been in the UK. I mean, I think Poland's probably had some, and the countries that were associated with the USSR back in sort of the 1980s, 1990s. But yeah, I mean, it's such a shame really to see some of these helicopters going, but it's what happens in war, really.
Yeah, you see lots of these videos of Mi-28s especially flying over Ukrainian roads as low as possible. So it's mainly the Ukrainian Air Force that you'd maybe see doing displays before the war. Like we had the Su-27s and stuff like that at Riyadh from the Ukrainian Air Force. So that's likely where we would have seen any of these helicopters displaying, if ever. But seeing two get destroyed is not great. It's a limited number of these aircraft, so any destroyed is not great.
Yeah, but we're going to move on to our second piece of Ukrainian news, which is the RAF Typhoons that were based in Romania were scrambled to intercept Russian drones that basically flew. They were still in Ukraine, but they flew to like the very edge of the border between Romania and Ukraine. So they scrambled the Typhoons, and Romania claims that the Typhoons actually shot missiles, and the Ministry of Defence says they didn't. So there's still reports coming in from both, from Romania and the UK saying if they did or didn't. So at the moment, we aren't sure as of time of recording. However, if there is any updates, we will let you know.
Yeah, and it goes to show you just how important it is that these typhoons, if they can and need to, they do shoot them down, because a Russian drone did actually fall in Romanian airspace, and from what I heard, caused a lot of issues. So it is important that the RAF Typhoons do scramble and intercept these drones if it comes near NATO airspace. But yeah, like Ollie said, it's sort of up in the air as to whether they actually shot down any of these drones or not.
Yeah, there has been multiple instances, not scenarios, where the Russian drones have crossed into NATO airspace. So you have things where it's crossed into like Latvia and Lithuania and Poland. I believe there's quite a big investigation about a few Russian drones crashing into a Polish farm back last year. So there is quite a lot of instances where Russian drones have gone over the Ukrainian border, intentional or not. It's good that we have these aircraft with the capabilities to shoot down these drones 24/7 if needed.
Yeah. Now moving on to the Iranian part of the news, there's not a whole lot here as well. An Iranian F-5 shot at US forces in Kuwait. Now I don't have as much information on this as Ollie does, so he'll take you through a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so basically, and we've spoken about F5s many times before, actually. So the Turkish stars, they fly the F5. That is basically the main sort of fighter bomber sort of role. So it's more like a strike aircraft. It's like sort of the main strike aircraft now for the Iranian Air Force. So with the F4 Phantoms and F14 Tomcats diminishing from their stockpile, the F5s are sort of the only thing left. So yeah, it took off from Iran and then flew over to Kuwait, basically undetected, which is very strange. You'd have thought that a non-stealth aircraft would be detected, but it flew very low, and there's not too much information. But all we know is that it shot at a US base. Whether anything was destroyed or not, we're not really too sure, and we believe that it made it back to base safely. But it's just very strange that these aircraft have got through US air defenses. I mean, we've literally got, or they have like things like the Patriot missile system, which is the best in the world, really. So yeah, it's really shocking to see that this was able to happen, and it's not something that I would have thought would ever have happened, really.
Yeah, you mentioned Patriot missile systems and it being basically undetected, which is interesting because within the first sort of couple of days of I believe people are calling it now the 36-day war or something like that. We're just going to refer to it as the Iran war. But within the first sort of few days of that, the main target of missiles and drones was air defense systems. It was radars that can detect these planes flying across. In fact, one of the most infamous Middle East radars built by the US was taken out within the first few days of the war. So, and the Patriot missile systems are drying up in terms of missiles. They've used years worth of supply in the last month and a half, maybe even 2 months. So it could be that it might start being more common that this does happen in areas in the Middle East just because these Patriot missile systems are sort of running out of missiles and the air defense systems and radars need to be fixed very quickly. So it could be that we see more of this in the coming weeks. Hopefully not, but Iran will see that been able to do this and possibly try and repeat it again. So if anything does happen, we'll let you know in our promos throughout the week or in the next episode as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only have they been used in Iran, but America actually sent quite a lot to Ukraine as well. So there's been thousands of missiles for the last 3, 4 years used in Ukraine alone. So now they've moved them. Well, they've sort of moved more from the mainland US to Iran. There's literally just they are running out very, very fast because they use very high tech, advanced, expensive missiles against these like drones that cost, like I said, 100 quid for like a normal FPV drone, or because basically Iran is just reproducing these. They're literally they have so many that they're still selling them to Russia during their own war. Like that's how many of these like Shahed drones that they have, just because they're so cost effective and that you can just make them within like a few days. So they're yeah, it's just the fact that they are running out of missiles thick and fast, and they're using them against these tiny little drones that yeah will cost millions in damage, but they only cost very well. They cost like 1/20th of what a Patriot missile costs.
Yeah, the average price estimated for a Shahed drone is something around $10,000 worth, and these Patriot missiles are hundreds of thousands of dollars. And oftentimes, to shoot down these drones, they are launching several missiles just to try and hit the drone. So it is just not cost effective and sustainable long term, which is not great, but they are hopefully going to be restocking just in case anything needs to be shot down in the future.
Yeah, but we're going to move on to our weather segment now because we have a lot of unfortunate weather news this week. So, I told Joey not to use the Q word in aviation last week, but what instead of causing major aviation news, he somehow caused an entire weather outbreak, which is very unfortunate. So this is why we never use the Q word in any of the on a podcast ever again. But we're going to start off with a bird's nado that was captured by Reed Timmer. The legendary Reed Timmer with the Dominator team. He captured a very cool video of birds just circling around in the sky called a bird nado. So we've talked about like leaf eddies before, so literally just leaves like that spinning around. This is basically just a bird eddy. It's just like a load of birds spinning around in a circle. So it's probably the funniest news or weather news that we've ever had before.
Yeah, it's not something you really see very often. Birds typically stay pretty clear of dangerous weather, but if it sort of times it right with like migration or anything, it is possible that you see these bird tornadoes. You hear about cows flying around in tornadoes and stuff, which isn't very common. It's more so been joked about since it was in the movie Twister.
Or
But
like
yeah,
Sharknado
bird
as well,
tornadoes
with
isn't
sharks
great.
flying
Yeah,
around.
shark. Yeah, a birdnado is something you don't really hear about, but these storm chasers are out recording tornadoes all year round. It's bound to see something like this at least once a year.
Well, yeah, I mean, they weren't really in a tornado. They were just circling around. They were just flying around in circles. So usually you'll see with things like starlings and that, not the display team, the bird. You'll usually see them making loads of different formations. They'll be like up here, down here. They'll just start flying around absolutely everywhere. Like if you watch like watch a Country File or something, usually you see like load of birds making formations in the sky. But in a really strange scenario, whether there was just a sort of spiral gust of wind there that they were flying around, or if they just genuinely wanted to fly around in circles, we don't know. But it's still interesting and quite funny nonetheless.
Yeah, now moving on to less fortunate news and less upbeat news is an EF4 tornado in Enid, Oklahoma, with multiple homes slabbed to the foundation. Now, this me and Ollie were watching the live stream that this occurred on. I didn't see it live, um, but this is not something you want to see. Storm chasers, they chase storms. They are upbeat about everything, but when it hits a town, they go straight into
Yeah.
rescue mode. A lot of storm chasers were straight into Enid helping, and this tornado actually, at the start of its lifespan, hit Vance Air Force Base just at the end of the runway, sort of just the outer perimeter. It's unclear as to the damage that it sustained, but as far as uh, public word is, it just damaged the outer perimeter fence. But the main damage was in Enid, Oklahoma, with, as I said, several homes slabbed to the foundation.
Yeah, so it's reported that it started off at I mean, it started off at around an EF1 intensity. So when it touched down literally at the end of Vance's Air Force Base runway, it took out a few of like the boards that show you where you go. So on airports and runways, you have boards telling you where you are and where like you're going. So let's say you're at Bravo 6, you'll see B6 on the side, and then if like across from you is Bravo 8, there'll also be B8 with like an arrow pointing straight ahead. It's like boards like that basically. They got knocked down, but no other damage was recorded really, other than like Joey said, the outer perimeter fence. However, it rapidly intensified less than like 20 seconds later into a very photogenic EF4 tornado that basically, like Joey said, slabbed these houses to the foundation. Now, it didn't have that big of a wind field, but the houses that were affected by this wind field did also sustain heavy damage. There'll be pictures up on the screen of the damage right now, and there luckily was no fatalities recorded in this, which is just incredibly lucky. Well, because you don't if you don't want fatalities in tornadoes, you would rather be able to just lose your home and then live from that rather than die. I mean, a load of deaths in violent tornadoes and even non-violent tornadoes. You can die in any tornadoes. In fact, there's an EF2 that had like at least two recorded deaths in it within the last week. And it's just so devastating to that community. The losses, there's usually graveyards put out in these places from the dead, which is just really unfortunate. But luckily, no one died. There was, I believe, two people injured, which is better than nothing. You'd rather have them injured rather than dead. But yeah, like Joe said, there were some houses that were completely gone, like wiped clean off the foundation. I'll put the picture that I showed Joey up on the screen now from the helicopter from one of the news agencies. It's just gone. You can see like the stairs and everything. You can see the concrete foundation that it was based on, and like the stairs that just lead up to like I assume where the door was. I'm not too sure because I didn't see the house before. But yeah, I saw it live on Ryan Hall's stream. It was I mean, I thought it was nighttime, but it was just very dark in that because it was the guy I was watching or we were watching were like behind the tornado. But some of the footage from Vance Air Force Base shows a very white and photogenic tornado. But yeah, so I watched sort of more the end of it because that's when Ryan panned or like got the camera to it. Um, and I can't remember who we were watching, but it basically did a loop. It literally went so it would cross the road in front of this guy, and then it turned around, went back across the road, and then went back up, and then did another loop. But we didn't actually see the second loop. We could just see the track when the NWS released it, National Weather Service. But yeah, then loads and loads of storm chasers, upwards of like 20 storm chasers, flocked to Enid to make sure everyone was okay. There was emergency services there very fast, including ambulances, fire or EMS and police. and then they closed the entire like motorway or what is it, interstate or whatever they call it in America, and only people like relatives of the victims, or not victims, but sort of family members of the houses that were destroyed were only like allowed to go there along with the emergency services. But yeah, this is the first EF4 tornado of 2026, and hopefully it's the last, because we don't want to see any more tornadoes this with this intensity, as it causes huge destruction damages. Luckily though, Ryan Hall, great guy, he has this basically thing called the Yule Squad, and they go out with like supplies and food and shelter and stuff like that to these damaged victims. So they went out there and they helped them a lot. So yeah, it's very unfortunate, but at the end of the day, these things happens, and educating people on how to be safe in these tornadoes is like the top priority. As you know, that I mean, when you see these pictures, you'll see why we originally thought people would have died, because just how bad the damage was. But luckily, I think a lot of people were watching the tornado streamers who told them to hide from this tornado, because they were tracking the supercell for quite a long time. So
And would I be correct in saying that Reed Timmer actually intercepted this tornado?
yes, yes, he did. He also intercepted other tornadoes, also including the Brahman tornado that basically knocked him into because they were changing the spikes basically, so they didn't really have a deployment system. Basically, deployment system. So you have a normal car. I don't. Okay, we'll use this F1 car that I have here for reference. So normal car, you have the road like here. I know it'd probably be like this with the wheels a bit further down. The deployment system basically just pushes it into the ground. So obviously with an F1 car, it's probably not the best example because it's already basically on the ground. But yeah, it basically just pushes it down so no winds can get under it and then lift it. That's why they go down, so it can't get any lift or a very minimal amount of lift. So yeah, but they didn't have spikes this time, so they couldn't put themselves in the ground. So even though it was an EF1 tornado, even though it could have been more intensity, we don't actually know. It pushed them backwards into the mud, and the TIV team basically came and rescued them. So that was really cool to see the Dominator and the TIV 2 together.
Yeah, and you mentioned that we don't actually know about the intensity. We do know that it was more intense than EF1 strength
Yes.
because the mesonet on top of the Dominator 3, its last sort of recording of wind speeds, which was from an indirect intercept, they did not go within the funnel, they were on the south side of the wind field, actually reached 126 miles an hour, even though the official rating for the tornado was around 85 miles an hour, which just goes to show again, we've made this point many times, that the EF scale is a damage scale,
Yeah.
and we are firm believers in that there should be a wind speed scale as well.
Yeah, we both think that the EF scale is a very bad sort of scale for tornadoes. We think it doesn't work most of the time. Like we get that it's based on damage, but if there is recorded wind speeds, like from mesonets, like from the Dows or anything like that, or any recording from anything, probes, mesonets, Dows, anything, there should be a whole new system to show the actual intensity of these tornadoes, because it was literally a humongous, absolutely huge hook. It was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. It was massive. Loads of storm chasers were on it. People like Brandon Kopic, they were on it. And honestly, it was huge. And then it touched down as a massive tornado with a what do you call it? A satellite tornado going around it. So technically a multi-vortex tornado. But yeah, it was crazy, and I was watching it live. We were very worried for the town of Bremen, or Brahman, I don't actually know how you say it, but luckily it lifted, I'm pretty sure, just before it hit the town, or it just went underneath the town and lifted. um but it could have been a deadly tornado, especially as Brahman is a not very well. So Enid is most made out of brick houses. These are more sort of very lower quality houses, so the damage could have been, and the death toll could have been very high.
Yeah, and across the last week or so, we've also had three EF2 rated tornadoes and one EF3 rated tornado, which hit mineral wells, which destroyed an extensive amount of homes. But it's still very early on since this sort of outbreak. So the reports are still coming in as to the damage, the strength of these tornadoes. A lot of them are still unrated as of now.
Yeah.
So that number will likely climb. But since April 22nd, at the start of this outbreak, there has been over 1,200 severe thunderstorm warnings and 276 tornado warnings. So it's been quite an extensive outbreak. There hasn't been 276 tornadoes, but there has been 276 tornado warnings.
Yeah, and it's crazy, but I mean, me and Joey don't usually like to pre-rate tornadoes. But for the Enid one, we were thinking that it could have been very high end EF4 or very low end EF5. It came out to be 175 mile an hour, so sort of a mid end EF4 tornado. But yeah, I think that's one of the only tornadoes me and Joey have ever sort of pre-rated because of the intensity that it looked and because there was a completely slabbed house. The trees were debarked, which you only see at EF4 intensity tornadoes. So yeah, but I mean, the one that hit Mineral Wells, there's some intense damage there. Honestly, it is insane. This outbreak so far has been the worst of 2026 with these three F3s, multiple EF2s, and the devastating EF4 that hit Enid.
There was also twin tornadoes the other day. A couple streamers were chasing that. A lot of storm chasers were chasing that. Twin tornadoes is not very common. It's not a multi-vortex tornado. Twin tornadoes are two separate tornadoes. Oftentimes, one of them is longer lasting than the other because they sort of kill each other's momentum, sort of thing.
Yeah,
But one
they
of them
use
did
each
go
other's
on
energy
to
usually,
last
and then
longer.
whatever the bigger one
Yeah.
is. But a great example of twin tornadoes is the Pilger EF4 tornadoes. So they are probably the most notorious twin tornadoes, being both very, very strong intensity tornadoes, very large tornadoes, and it's just a great example. I'll put a picture up on the screen so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. But they were basically the exact same size. I don't know if they're both rated EF4, but I know at least one of them was rated EF4.
Yeah, Nebraska, Pilger, Nebraska. People often just call it the Pilger, Nebraska EF4 twins. But yeah, like you said, I'm not entirely sure as to whether it was both of them rated EF4 or not. But I feel like if two tornadoes follow the exact same trajectory in such quick succession, it's kind of hard to rate each one individually because they hit the same things.
Yeah, now the last bit of weather news we have, moving on from this unfortunate outbreak, is that the biggest hail ever recorded from June 2024 has now been rated as the world's largest hail at 7.1 inches. So yeah, you think that a normal hail is like the size of maybe a golf ball maximum on these sort of things. To now think 7 inches, that is absolutely huge for a piece of hail. I mean, you get these things in the UK that are maybe the size of like your fingernail or something. But to think that, I mean, this thing was like bigger than this guy's hand when he was holding it. It was honestly huge.
Yeah, speaking of UK weather as well, UK weather tomorrow, as of recording this, which would be Friday, is looking somewhat interesting. I first saw it on my weather app. It said thunderstorms for tomorrow. Uh, Upon actually looking at the uh, conditions, I don't personally think there will be thunderstorms tomorrow. I will happily be proven wrong, but at
Yeah,
least for
same
me, I
here.
don't believe there will be. But South England, especially Southeast England, there is a lot of convective available potential energy, which is called CAPE. And you hear Americans talking about this a lot during outbreaks. They're talking about how they have maybe even 2,000, 3,000 CAPE, which is just the amount of energy available for a storm. It doesn't necessarily mean tornadoes, it could mean thunderstorms. It just depends on the conditions. But South England, on some prediction models right now, is looking like it could get upwards of 1,400 CAPE, which in places like America and stuff is more than enough to produce tornadoes. We get a lot of funnel clouds in England and we rarely get over 2,000 CAPE. So 1,400 is quite high CAPE for us. And it'll be interesting to see what what comes out of it, to be honest. Thunderstorms is the most likely outcome. My weather app is still convinced there's thunderstorms tomorrow, even though nothing I could find would insinuate that. But South England, I would say, is definitely going to see some thunderstorms tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, me and Joey are both in sort of 400 to 500 cape areas, which is pretty normal in terms of cape. You're always going to have some sort of cape in the atmosphere. Otherwise, it's physically, if there's no energy in the atmosphere, there is no atmosphere. But so yeah, I mean, with the outbreak that caused the EF4 tornado had around 5,000 capes, so we can see that we can pretty much safely say that we're not getting an EF4 tornado, luckily. But there is still a chance for small tornadoes to form. Like we said a few episodes ago, we have the most tornadoes per square kilometer of land. So America, they'll have thousands a year. But just because we're smaller, it doesn't really matter how many tornadoes we have. On average, we will have more per square kilometer. So there is definitely potential for maybe weak tornadoes to form. So EF1 really maybe at maximum. But I mean, if a tornado hits London and it causes damage, that is going to be a high rated tornado. It might only be EF 2 intensity, but if that slams through downtown London and that rips buildings to pieces, then there's going to be a very high rated tornado. So it's something to look out for, but I don't think there's going to be too many. I believe firmly that there'll be funnel clouds, but I don't think there'll be many tornadoes.
Yeah, like how you say, look out for it, but this will be up after it's happened. So, um, we'll definitely be talking about what, if anything happens, what happened in next week's episode. But by the time this goes out, you guys will know what has happened, if anything does happen. But now we move on from weather news to my favorite segment, which is space news, which is somewhat busy this week. We had three big rocket launches and something a little extra, which I'll talk about at the end in space news. So we had a Falcon Heavy launch yesterday, as of recording this, launching Viasat 3 to geostationary orbit, which is basically when your orbit period matches the rotation of Earth. So you basically just stay above the same spot on Earth the entire time, which is a lot harder to get to
And how
than
fast
low
would
Earth
this
orbit.
rocket have
Hence
to be
why
going, or how slow would it have to be going to sort of just stay above the same spot?
It's sort of difficult because I don't know the actual figures. I can try and work it out, sort of, but it will be in the tens of thousands of kilometers per
Yeah.
hour. But it's just the altitude of the orbit that's the main factor in this because the orbital period depends on the altitude above Earth. If you are lower above Earth, you are going to orbit around it quicker. It's the same sort of mechanism that would happen if you swing something around that is like super far away from you, it takes longer and it's slower to spin around. But if you make that string or whatever shorter, you can spin it around super quick and it's fine. But it's similar mechanism to that. The higher in your orbit, the longer the orbit period. So if you just fine tune that, you can be in geostationary orbit, which is good for communication satellites. If you're trying to talk to anyone in the United States, you would put a geostationary satellite above the United States, and you would have constant satellite access over the United States. But that wasn't the only rocket launch we had, but it was definitely the most interesting because of the side boosters, which landed very far apart from each other. You'll see clips of other Falcon Heavy launches where the side boosters they do their boost back burn, which is what they call just doing a U-turn in the sky, and they'll land basically right next to each other, and it's just basically they have two landing zones next to each other. But they didn't for this launch. They landed one at landing zone 2 and one at landing zone 40. These were far enough away that on the live streams you could hear the sonic booms from one of the boosters, and then it took about 20 to 30 seconds before you even heard the sonic booms from the other one. And it was a very distant sounding sonic boom. So it was quite a unique Falcon Heavy launch in that regard. It was also the first side booster landing at landing zone 40. So that was definitely the most interesting one. I was watching that on my TV downstairs. But the other launches we had were the Ariane 64 launch and the Atlas V launch, which were both carrying Amazon LEO satellites, which is sort of Amazon's answer to Starlink Wi-Fi. They're planning to launch as many uh, satellites in this exact constellation as possible. So they had two launches over the last few days, um, which I like to see, especially with the Ariane 64. European Space Agency is getting involved with launching rockets from Europe. Um, but other than that, for space news, we had a mini Starship documentary. So Starship is SpaceX's biggest ever rocket. It's the biggest ever rocket humanity has ever built. It's the most powerful rocket humanity has ever built. It's still a sort of experimental rocket. It's still in very much prototype testing. But they made a documentary mainly focusing on the recent version 3 booster static fire and ship version 3 static fire on the brand new Launchpad 2. But the documentary is only about 25 minutes long. Hopefully, they'll just keep filming stuff like this and uploading it as Starship progresses. But it's exciting to see that they are trying to make more media about it because Starship, SpaceX themselves have sort of died down a little bit on the media front recently. They haven't been making like recap videos on Starship launches, but they seem to be getting back into it. They also posted this on YouTube, which they haven't posted anything on their YouTube channel about Starship in quite a long time. So hopefully we start seeing more and more media about Starship and SpaceX and just rocket launches in general. But it's been a good week for space news.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that the documentary is not about a mini Starship. It's just a mini documentary about Starship. So don't get confused with that, because I know a few people might get confused about a mini Starship. What we on about is just like an RC. But yeah, I mean, Joey's been up to tabs with all of the space news, so it's great to see that there's been a lot of rocket launches recently, and I'm sure the sort of conquest of space continues over the next sort of 10, 20 years when hopefully we'll be getting to Mars. But we're going to move on to the main news now, which we had a RAF Fairford fire, which I actually put as fair on the promo video that I posted on Instagram and TikTok by accident, which I then changed. But yeah, it was a very strange fire in a building that was pretty much unused. So we still don't know the cause, and we don't really know the extent of the damage. We just know that there was a fire in a basically back hangar of Fairford.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the misspelling because I actually brought it up to you after my mum brought it up to me. She saw it on the video, and then I brought it up to you. But yeah, this is a unique thing. You don't really see fires at RAF bases because that's pretty suboptimal, if I had to say so myself. But you don't really see it, and it's definitely we just had to cover it because this is uncommon. And if there are any updates on this, we will let you know in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of this, we don't actually know if this was terrorism related, but just a thought that's popped into my mind is that the UK terrorism like threat level has gone up to severe, I believe it is. So there has been many things going on in the UK in the last few days, which is off topic. But if this was a terrorist incident, like there has been before, with like we spoke about last week with the damaging of the C-130 and some of the Voyagers and stuff at Bryce Norton and that. This could 100% have been a terrorist sort of fire, but it could also have just been a fire in an unused hangar. We don't know. I just thought it'd be a cool thing to, well, not a cool thing, but a good thing to bring up along this topic.
Yeah, the terrorism threat level was raised from significant to severe, um, mainly regarding just recent events in the UK, like you said. But this did also happen on sort of a busy day for Furford. They had protesters, so it's not a great day for Furford. They had protesters protesting the Iran war and US bases in the UK. And then when it got to the evening and night time, they also had a fire in a building. Um, so it wasn't a great day for RAF Furford, but the authorities put out the fire relatively quickly. And based on what we know, the building was basically unused and the extent of the damage was limited to that building itself.
Yeah, the next piece of news we have is at least 5 people have been injured after a A330 rejected its takeoff after an engine fire. So this was Swiss flight 147 that literally apparently had an engine fire on takeoff. So they had to slam on the brake, and because that when you slam the brake, you go flying forwards and so and I mean, people could have hit the seats in front of them. They could have hurt their heads. I mean, they could also have been flown back as soon as the plane stopped. So we don't actually know how the extent of the injuries. We just know that at least 5 people have been injured, and it's not something that you usually see an engine fire on takeoff. Now, we did have a very strange incident with the UPS MD-11 last year, where the engine just fell off. and then that caused fire. But I mean, you don't tend to see an engine fire on takeoff. However, it is usually the most likely place you'll see it because it is when the engines and usually the only time the engines are at maximum throttle or near to maximum throttle. But yeah, it's a very strange incident, and we got it from Aaron Rains as per usual. Aaron Rains is a very good news reporter. I don't know if Joey has any more information on this though.
I don't, but I think you are pretty much probably accurate with how the injuries were sustained because you think when you're accelerating in a plane or even a car, you're being pushed back into your seat and your body instinctively tries to resist that by pushing forwards. It's why when you stop accelerating, you move forward slightly. It's because you're still pushing forwards. But going from being pushed back into your seat to being pushed forward into the other
Or
seat
even forward and
with
then
the added
backwards. Yeah,
momentum, yeah, with the added momentum of you already pushing forwards, you're going to very likely collide with that seat in front of you. And backs of plane seats are not made soft as well. I fly Ryanair, so I'm not sure on other airlines, but backs of plane seats typically aren't made soft.
yeah, they're made of like
So
plastic or
head
something
first,
usually. So
yeah, head first into that is not gonna be great. But I think you're pretty much gonna be dead on with how those injuries were sustained.
now the next thing we have, which again another very strange incident. A man was arrested after plane spotting. Now I believe Joey has a bit more information on this matter.
Yeah, so this was a Chinese national plane spotting in America, I believe, and he was studying aeronautical engineering in America,
Yeah.
and he went plane spotting, and which people do all the time. It's a common thing. Um, but due to him being a Chinese national, at least based on information we have, they deemed it slightly suspicious and detained him and arrested him. And there's not much more information on his arrest or anything, but uh, it was very likely due to either testing something that wasn't supposed to be seen, or due to the fact that he was a Chinese national, he was seen as a possible national security risk. But it's not something you see very often. Being arrested for plane spotting, which is many governments see as a harmless hobby, isn't common. I know that if you go to certain air bases, they will arrest you or just ask you to stop taking pictures, especially in some countries in Europe as well. They don't really like it when you take pictures of planes, like Poland, for example. Plane spotting at military bases is basically just entirely forbidden in Poland. Um, but in America and the UK, it's seen as a harmless hobby. As long as you're doing it to a reasonable degree, you're not photographing uh, prototype aircraft that are in testing or a top secret military base. It's seen as a hobby, so to see someone getting arrested for it uh, isn't great to see, but hopefully there'll be a bit more information on what happened to the guy who was arrested by next week's episode.
Yeah, so our next piece of news is the F-16 demo team. The aircraft had to make an emergency landing while it was making its way back to America from Peru. So it was being escorted by, well, we could see the two KC-135s that were escorting it, and then there was news afterwards that the F-16 had to land. Now, we don't know really what the cause of this was. It could have just been a general emergency, but it's not something that you usually see. Now, I'm just going to quickly skip through this news section here. So, Benjamin Netanyahu, the basically leader of Israel, also had to fly around many Middle Eastern countries and even European countries just to get to Kazakhstan for sort of like peace talks and stuff like that. He flew out of Israel, over Europe, around like Belarus, through like Lithuania and Latvia, through Russia, and then to Kazakhstan, instead of the route that basically just takes him from Israel over the Middle East to Kazakhstan. So I think the normal journey took around, or should take around 5 to 6 hours, but it ended up taking around 13 hours. So that's definitely, I mean, that's almost triple the flight time that it should have taken. But yeah, I mean, the plane is going to get shot down if it even attempts to fly over the Middle East. So I mean, it was the safest thing to do.
Yeah, it had to avoid mainly like the one of the biggest delaying countries that it had to fly around was Turkey as well, just due to the fact that it sort of sticks out into I forget what sea it's called. I think it's maybe the Red Sea or something like that. But it sort of sticks out into that sea. So it did have to do like it had to actually head west. For a country that is east, it had to fly
Yeah.
west for the first few hours. Um, but that was due to it having to fly around Turkey, just due to Turkey saying that they will arrest the prime minister if they fly over the airspace. So this is something you see during war, planes having to divert around countries. I mean, even right now, Russia and Ukraine, the airspace basically has been desolate around the border between the two for the last 3 or 4 years. Um, During the Iran war, there was no planes flying over basically most of the Middle East. So it's something you see quite often, but having to fly around Turkey as well is what really made this take a lot longer.
Yeah, so our last few things is that a 737 has hit a drone while landing, and there has been apparently two dead after a plane crashes into a hangar, which Joey should have more information on.
Yeah, so having seen the video of this happening, I personally still don't know how this happened. I'm not sure if anyone does. But this was in Australia, I believe. I think I'm correct in saying Australia. And the plane it was a light aircraft, and it basically just crashed into it was flying and then just sort of plummeted into a hangar. It's unclear as to how this happened. There'll probably be more information on it in the coming weeks. If we find out, we will let you know. But crashes like this with light aircraft is something that you sort of see every week or so. We cover it every week or so if something happens like this. But a lot of the time, due to these being light aircraft and them not flying necessarily as quick, you don't see fatalities from it. There was one, I think last week even, when one hit a power line and
Yeah.
ended up upside down in a car park. The guy survived, and that's a much more a dynamic sort of way of crashing. But to see there's two fatalities after crashing into a hangar is not something we want to see.
Yeah, it is very unfortunate, but we do have to move on to our next and main part of this podcast, which is basically us talking about how the airshow circuit in the UK is dying. There's been many air shows that we have lost. There is many air shows that are dying, and there is many aircraft that have been taken off of the sort of like display roster in the last few years, and that's what we're going to be taking you through right now. So we're going to start off with the aircraft that we've lost. So this includes the Vulcan, the very well-renowned Vulcan XH558, which was one of my favorite. Well, it was my favorite aircraft that flew back when I saw it at Dunsville Wings and Wheels. I put a picture up of my mum's photo last week of the Vulcan with the Nats. Joey knows that it went to Blackpool or Southport Air Show, so me and Joey have both loved the Vulcan, and it's such an unfortunate aircraft to leave the display roster, but it's just so it would be billions of pounds to fly now because there's no parts being made for the Vulcan, and even the people who made it don't want it to be flown. Like they refuse to insure it because they know that it's not worth it and it'll be more expensive if it there's physically no way of making a new Vulcan if this one crashes. So
Yeah, the Vulcan is one of my favorite aircraft of all time. It showed just how ahead of the times it was back when it was sort of first introduced. It did simulated nuclear strikes on U.S. cities as they were testing their anti-nuclear aircraft
yeah, the only
systems or
aircraft
whatever.
that nuked the
Um,
US
yeah,
and it did it twice. So
yeah, and its howl is one of the most iconic noises in aviation, I would say, ever. But you can still see it doing some taxi runs. Places like Carlisle have one. Carlisle, I believe it's Aircraft Museum. They have one, and they're currently working on just keeping it working so they can do taxi runs. I would love to see one of these flying again, but it's just the odds of that are basically zero.
I mean, if me and Joey
But
ever
I would
become
love
like
to also,
billionaires, then we'll
yeah,
try and get it flying. But other than that, it's yeah, it's a big shame that it doesn't fly anymore.
yeah, I would one day try and get up to Carlisle while they're doing one of the taxi runs, and if I do, I'll make sure to get so many pictures of it, and we'll put them on uh, whatever the next episode is after that. But I saw it plenty of times at Blackpool Air Show, and I attribute the Vulcan um, as one of the Vulcan stopping doing air shows and stopping flying entirely as one of the sort of reasons Blackpool air show is not as good as it used to be. But we'll get onto the sort of dying air shows a bit later on.
Yeah, so the next aircraft that we want to talk about is the Canberra PR9 that returned for the 2014, late 2014, and the full 2015 and the early 2016 season. It flew at Dunsfold Wings and Wheels, which we'll be talking a bit more about later. And it also flew with a Hawker Hunter, which is another aircraft that doesn't fly anymore. And it's just, I mean, these Cold War aircraft era aircrafts are just so amazing, or were so amazing to see. They were some of the most interesting displays ever, especially with the commentary with all the history about it. I personally loved it, but the last ever Canberra flight was in 2016 with this Canberra before the company that was running it went under. It went bankrupt and had to sell all the aircraft, and it is now grounded. It's now stationary, and it will never ever be turned on again. It will literally. I mean, they might disassemble it and move it to different airports, but it will never have its engines on ever again.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've ever seen the Canberra PR9. I hope that I have, but if I have, I don't remember it. But it would be great to see one of these flying again. Like you said, the historical aircraft, hearing about all the facts and stuff, it's just one of the most interesting things about going to an air show. You learn whilst you're watching these
Yeah.
planes, which just makes it fun to learn about the history. You hear about, especially these World War II era planes. There is so much history about them because a lot of them have served in World War II. You can hear about sort of missions they've flown and stuff. So it's really unfortunate that these aircraft are old enough that we are seeing them get phased out all the time. But moving on to a more modern aircraft with the Su-27, this still flies, but it is currently being used in the Ukraine-Russia war, and mainly was displayed by the Ukrainian Air Force, especially at places like Riyadh. This is also alongside the MiG-29, which we'll get onto in a second. But seeing these aircraft is something that I would love to see. Like, I wish that I had gone to Riyadh before 2022 because I would have just seen these Su-27s and MiG-29s displaying. It's such a unique aircraft. I see pictures of them all the time, but just due to the ongoing situation in the world, you just don't see them displaying anywhere anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to see, well, to see the Su-27. I don't remember it, unfortunately, and I don't know where my React photos are. I've honestly been looking for these for years, for like 5 years now. I've been looking for these photos, and I just can't find them anywhere. There was also the MiG-21 from like the Romanian Air Force or something that also went in 2019. I lied. I have seen a flying tornado in 2019. I have also seen a static phantom in 2019. So all the times I've said I've never seen a tornado or phantom before, I have, but I just don't remember it, and I can't find any of the photos from it. But I mean, I haven't seen them before because I don't remember it. Is what I'm now going off of. So it'd be good to see those this year. But like Joey said, the Su-27 has been caught up uh, in the Ukrainian war and will probably never be flown in air shows ever again. At least not in the near future. But the MiG 29 is still flown by quite a few air forces, including like Poland and sort of like Czechia and like stuff like that. These countries around that area still fly the MiG 29. But I mean, there's a few privately owned in America. I mean, I think one usually attends Oshkosh every year or most years. I mean, it's sort of in like a white and black like camo scheme, but you just don't see them at air shows anymore. You used to see them every single year at Riyadh. I think one went in like 2022 or 2023, but it hasn't been since, and it's just such a shame because it's such a beautiful aircraft. Like honestly, it's just such an amazing aircraft to see. It's a rare aircraft. It's a Soviet Cold War era aircraft like the Su-27 that we just don't get to see anymore. And all these aircraft, because we're just not building new aircraft these days. We're building like one. So back in the first jet age, we'd build like 20 like first generation fighters, then you build like 15 second gens, then like 10 third gens, then like two fourth gens, and then like okay, we had like five 4.5 gens, and then we had three, I think three, maybe four fifth gen fighters, and now we're gonna have about four um four sixth generation stealth fighters, maybe five. But along with the jets, you'd also have still prop aircraft being made. So you'd still have, Spitfires were in service until like the 1970s. Same with the Mustang. I mean, the Mustangs were still being used in Africa in like the 1980s, but they just don't get produced anymore. We're not making new aircraft just because we don't need them, and that's what's destroying the display circuit in the UK. Is because we just don't have anyone other than really like Duxford and Shuttleworth that build these, or like at least maintain these aircraft for a flying state. And it's just such a shame because things like the F4 Phantoms are not flown anymore, other than like three countries. The F-35B roll demonstration, literally our aircraft, it doesn't even do the demonstration anymore. The last demonstration it ever did was in like 2022, and it's not been seen since. It's just crazy to me how rapid this decline in the UK display circuit really is.
Yeah, one of my personal beliefs as to why it's sort of decaying is similar to what you just said, in that because we don't need as many of these aircraft. Like back in World War II, you needed a lot of Spitfires because they were getting shot down
Yeah,
constantly. You'd need to replace them, so you built thousands. Whereas with, say, the F-22 in America, they don't they aren't built to get anywhere near getting shot down, so they can just use the same one over and over again. So they haven't built that many of them, as well as just even any aircraft. Like the Tempest is not done yet, but I personally think there won't be that many of them built because it isn't designed to get close to being shot down. So it just wasn't need many, and I think the lack of quantity is one of the main factors as to why shows are sort of going downhill um, within the last couple of decades.
yeah, I mean, it's also the fact that these Cold War aircraft are just so impossible to maintain. The reason why we still have 50 Spitfires in the UK is because there's parts everywhere. Then, I mean, some of them are made of wood. Like, they're so easy to maintain. But these things like the Gloucester Meteor, the first ever UK jet aircraft, or at least that we know of. I mean, there's probably some UK secret jet that we never heard of. But none of them fly anymore. The Gloucester Javelin doesn't fly anymore. But like back in like the 1960s, there were so many races that were going on. You'd have like the air races. That's why the Comet was built. You'd have, I mean, the P-51 was made into a racing aircraft. So there is still racing aircraft of P-51 made today. You'd also have, I mean, the Extra 300 that was made back in the day, and the Pit Special, all made back in the 1980s, that just don't really get produced anymore because there's just no need for them. No one's interested in being the fastest aircraft ever because because there's jets now. There's no air races really anymore. You have the Red Bull air race, but where are you seeing a Comet in that? It's just that used to be so much variety of events that were held. There were so many races, there were so many events, there were showcases. I mean, the best that we're getting these days is at Shuttleworth where they're trying to get the biggest gyrocopter gathering all in one place. So it's just the fact that there is no aircraft being built anymore. And if we go back to Riyadh in like the 1980s, you'd have Hawker Hunters, Canberras, probably the Vulcan. You'd have MiG 21s, MiG 29s, Su 27s. They literally had the Tu 95. Russia sent a Tu 95 to Riyadh. Where are we getting this these days? Obviously we're not going to get it because of the war, but that was like the only time they ever sent it was like back in like the 1980s and 90s. We didn't even get it in the 2000s. It's just the fact that the like countries are just not willing to send their aircraft over anymore, and we don't have the like resources to build any or maintain any rare aircraft.
Yeah, so speaking of, you mentioned the F4 Phantom. That one's another one that we are seeing less and less of these days. I know there's the Turkish F4 Phantom that does display still. But just especially in the UK, we're seeing less and less of these F4s. They are older aircraft, so it's just harder to find parts, which is again one of the main factors with most of these aircraft is finding parts. Um, you just can't find any, and if anything breaks on your F4 and you can't find a part for it, you either have to find a way to build it yourself,
Or
or you just
scrap
have
it.
to accept that you scrap it, or just accept that it's now a vintage, a static piece in your house. So it's just another one of those that we would love to see flying more. But I mean, even in the Iran war, you've seen a few videos of F4s being taken out, by missiles and drones. So it's just a diminishing quantity, and they're not making new ones to replace them. So it's just very unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, me and Joey were discussing this earlier before we started recording. The sort of end of the golden age of air shows was sort of like around the 2000s. But before the 2000s, they were insane. But we think the end, complete sort of dead end for air shows in the UK was COVID. We used to get some of these aircraft at Riyadh. Like I said, we had the MiG-21 at Riyadh. When are you ever going to see a MiG-21 flying? Like, but after 2020, you just don't have this many aircraft. I mean, they all just got retired. I mean, the Tornado got retired in 2019 for the RAF, like we mentioned. That's a thing gone from the display roster. So it's just yeah, COVID. We personally think ruined a lot of these air shows, and we'll get on to and aircraft displays. We'll get on to the air shows in a minute.
Yeah, COVID, I would, like as you said, we definitely both attribute to it. I think one of the main factors was just the fact that everyone had to stay inside, and people just after COVID don't go out as much anymore, which includes going to air shows, and that's where the air shows get their funding from, is people going to the air shows. So you're seeing less people that are traveling to go to as many air shows per year. I know that the numbers, like the number of people attending these air shows, is increasing again now, as people are getting more and more back used to getting out of the house. But that like year or so hit very hard for the air show industry. I know Riyadh held a virtual air show, um, which was great. I wish I was more into aviation to watch that. But them picking back up the next year from something that has never happened before during the days of air shows. It's just a very big hit to the entirety of aviation as a whole as well.
Yeah, I mean, some other aircraft that have sort of been disappearing over the have disappeared completely. Things like the English Electric Lightning that used to literally have a whole display team and demo. The Spec Jaguar that also used to have a demo, an RAF demo. Other things include sort of the Sea King. I mean, luckily we do have restoration groups that do bring the Sea King. I know there's one in the UK now with historic helicopters, and also the Belgium sort of historic group have one. But I mean, things like the Hawk T1s will be disappearing soon. I mean, the Red Arrows will be retiring them within the next 4 to 5 years. The Typhoon, same with the Typhoon, really, that's being retired within the next 5-10 years, depending on how fast we can get the Tempest out. The F111 is also gone. I mean, it wasn't very common in the UK, but that is also gone. And obviously, you have things like the Hawker Hunters, like we mentioned at the start, and the Vickers VC10 that also used to do some flyovers as well.
Yeah, the Hawker Hunters is sort of a unique one. We talked about the other aircraft. It is just hard to find parts for them, or they are uh, old, or they're in war. But the Hawker Hunters, it's different. They are banned from displaying in the UK. I know that they are more older aircraft anyway, so they would be disappearing soon anyway. But they are banned in the UK from displaying entirely.
Yeah, so there is actually so many airworthy Hawker Hunters. I mean, there's actually usually like two or three at RIA every year, and I've mentioned how they flew behind my boat when I was at the Lake District. So it's a really big shame because I'm sure there would be many Hawker Hunter displays. It's just the fact that they are banned, and we can see the reason why. 100%, we understand the reason why they are banned. But again, it's just so sad to see this, but because of one incident, and it was. I'm not saying this. We're not. I'm not saying we should brush over this incident, but at the end of the day, loads of planes have crashed, and they've still kept them on the display circuit. So I can see why they've taken the Hawk Hunter off. It is an old aircraft, but I mean. It's just the fact that there has been many crashes. I mean, the Red Arrows have crashed. They didn't just stop with the Red Arrows. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, um, I would love to see Hawker Hunter display teams in the UK. I've seen one Hawker Hunter in my life, and it flew over my house at about like 5,000 feet. I think I mentioned this
Yeah,
in
you
one of
did.
the last
Yeah.
episodes, but it flew over my house at like 5,000 feet above very thin clouds, so I could not get any good pictures of it. I could barely even see it. But just seeing any of these aircraft displaying again would be just such a cool experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the Hawker Hunter. I saw it at Dunsfold Wings and Wheels, which you're about to get on actually. But I've seen it flying with the Canberra. So the Hawk, there was a silver Hawker Hunter and a silver Canberra, which is the one we literally mentioned at the start. And they did like a duo display together. That was amazing to see. I mean, I have a Dunsfold disc, like a 2014 Planes TV sort of disc, like recap that sort of stuff. So I get to see that. But I mean, we're going to move on to the air shows now that have been discontinued. So we're going to start off with Dunsfold Wings and Wheels. Now, that was my first ever air show, and it hit so hard when that stopped because that was the basically the only air show that I'd been going to for 6 years, 5, 6 years. Um, and honestly, I was so upset when I heard that it was ending. I mean, there were plans to bring it back in 2020, but then COVID hit, and then they just completely stopped those plans. So I remember I was discussing with my family, do you think that'll ever come back? And they said, yeah, there's some like plans for it to maybe come back in 2020, and then yeah, COVID hit, and that stopped all of that. But honestly, it's just so unfortunate. I mean, people know it as the Top Gear test track. I mean, they literally went up and down the runway and that sort of stuff, but it was just such an amazing family air show. Honestly, it's basically just it was like React, but just a smaller version. And I made some of the best memories like that I can actually remember there. I mean, I like I said, I don't remember React, but what I do remember is Dunsfold Wings and Wheels. And I know you can't see, but I have a picture up on my wall signed with the old Red 10. Um, what's his name? Adam Collins, I think it was. I think that's his name
Yeah.
anyway. And I got a picture with him on that red camera. You know the like I don't know Nikon thing, red little camera. I got that. That was one of the best memories because it was on 0% battery life. It would literally 1 second later. Like he took the picture, and by the time he gave it back to me, it was dead. So with those sort of cameras, you can turn them back on. And then they'll die again in 5 seconds. So I turned it back on and saw, okay, he's got the picture, awesome. But yeah, no, that was one of the cool, and that was in like the last show. I think that might have been, yeah, no, that was 2019. So that was in the literally last ever display uh, season for Nuns for Wings and Wheels. But Bournemouth is another one that's gone. That was amazing. I went to that with my family all the time. That was amazing family air show. Um, I mean, there was some rare aircraft there. The Typhoon went there. I mean, the Vulcan went there. The Just 39. No, sorry, not the Just 39. The Just 37 went there, along with the Draken as well. So the Saab 35 Draken. Those two went there. Unfortunately, I didn't get any good pictures because my camera was broken. But, I mean, other air shows include Cold Rose, Scampton, Waddington. So they used to host like family days and like display days and stuff there. They don't do that anymore. Yeovilton as well. They that did the same. Sywell Air Show that came back in 2024 and then stopped after that. So, I mean, it's just there's just a lack of air shows now. I mean, there's like none around me. The closest to me is Hampshire, which so it used to be Leon Solent, which they have now stopped and moved to Thruxton. So that's like the closest air show to me. That's like an hour and a half away. So
Yeah, I think Scampton's an interesting sort of case because I know the airshow stopped before the Herb base closed, but RAF Scampton is completely closed now to any force activity. So it's not even just these air shows that are disappearing, but air bases as well. Just as they become redundant and they don't need them anymore, they move whatever aircraft were based there to a different one that they have room in. So yeah, it's not just air shows. Air bases, aircraft are going out of service, and they're not bringing new ones in
yeah,
to replace them. So the number is decreasing.
yeah. I mean, it's honestly such a shame. Like, I mean, Dunsfold. Basically the reason why they don't do Dunsfold is because like brought out and they want to like build on it or make it into a housing estate or something like that. And obviously you can't have noisy aircraft flying over. Like, I just don't. That's what really annoys me about it. Is if you're going to move into a house by an airbase, you can't complain. The airbase was there long before your house was there, and you've decided to move into that and then complain when aircraft fly there. It's just, yeah, no, it's really it's just a big shame, and yeah, I can't. I honestly could not believe the news when I heard Dunsfold Wings and Wheels was ending because it was the I think my top three air shows were Dunsfold Wings and Wheels, Sywell 24, and then Midlands Air Festival. Just I don't know, just Dunsfold Wings and Wheels are just so nostalgic to me, and it's unfortunate that I can't find many photos from it. I mean, I can find a few, but not that many.
Yeah, my nearest air shows are Southport and Blackpool, which we'll actually get onto in a second. But I just can't imagine any of those stopping because I've been going to them since I was a kid. The first air show I ever went to, at least it was either Southport or Blackpool, but I'm pretty sure it was Blackpool. And I just can't imagine Blackpool air show especially stopping. But talking of Southport and Blackpool, we'll talk about the air shows that we personally believe are dying or just getting progressively not worse and worse each year, but less exciting each year. And we'll start off with Southport actually. Um, this is mainly due to no fault of their own last year. They had no Red Arrows attending, which they have had basically every single year. Um, and then one of the days it was raining hard enough that nothing could display. So they had one day, and the most exciting thing was the typhoon, and there was nothing else that sort of people, especially in where I'm like around where I'm from, uh, like in the northwest, they mainly go to air shows to see the red arrows. I think we talked about this on the last episode or so, but the red arrows is what drive people to air shows, and Southport didn't have that. So instead, they brought it was the Draken and the Vigan, but they pulled out. So the exciting thing they had that was in place of the Red Arrows didn't even attend. So there was just nothing unique or exciting about Southport Airshow, considering there was a free airshow really close to it, like a month earlier. So Southport, especially over the last couple of years as well, we've seen less and less sort of activity and interest in it. I know that I still go as much as I can to Southport, but it used to, like when I was growing up, you used to be able to drive onto the beach, park your car, and it was like a drive-in airshow. And I just have great memories of sitting on top of my dad's car, looking up and seeing all the jets flying right in front of me. But they stopped you from parking on the beach now, and now they have less and less aircraft attending each year. I do hope that they start getting more and more aircraft each year. I hope that they start letting people onto the beach, do the drive-in show thing again. Um, but I think that mainly stopped for safety reasons because it just meant that the jet either had to fly further away or it was flying too close to you, and they didn't want to move the display line back a bit more. So it's mainly due to safety reasons, as far as I'm aware, that they had to get rid of the drive-in aspect of it. But it's just really unfortunate to see one of my childhood air shows just sort of fizzling out.
Yeah, and the thing is, you'll notice a huge sort of what do you call it? Like group. What's the word? I honestly mind blanked right
Trend?
there. Sorry.
Trend?
Yeah, that's what it is. A huge sort of trend here, of like beach air shows, I guess. And the whole reason is basically COVID. Again, COVID has really hurt these air shows because all the seaside air shows are funded by the council. They're not they don't really have many sponsors, and and because you have to pay for displays as well, and they're very generic. There's something for more like a family to go to rather than an aviation enthusiast to go to, because you always have the Red Arrows, the BBMF, the Typhoon, Rich Goodwin, like the Firebirds and stuff like that. But things like Midlands, the thing that excites people to go there is the MiG 17. Last year that they had the F-86 Sabre. They had like Moggy and Blackjack the years before, and like the Lancaster with the Typhoon. That's what pushes these people towards the air shows. Things with like Bournemouth, Southport, Blackpool, Torbay, Clacton, Eastbourne, all these sort of things, is they're just very generic sort of Red Arrows, BBMF, Typhoon standard. There's Once you've seen these aircraft, like I'm gonna see the BBMF like 5 or 6 times this year. So's Joey. They're still exciting, but once you've seen them that many times, it just doesn't excite you to go to those air shows anymore. And because they're funded by the council, they can't get these awesome things from like maybe France, Germany, Italy, like because Riyadh, they'll bring things from like Africa over and like Ukraine back in the days and stuff like that. These airshows just can't afford that, unfortunately, and because COVID took a huge hit on their income, because they still make income from these airshows, it's just not that profitable. But yeah, so we personally believe like 90% of these seaside air shows will be gone within the next 10 years, especially Southport and Eastbourne, as they're just struggling with funding. It's the same with Bournemouth, like I just said. It just ran out of funding. Now, there are possible maybe plans for like 10 years for Bournemouth to come back, but it's just not that profitable really, and it's something that is really hurting sort of the airshow circuit, with at least 10 airshows being taken off the circuit within the next 10-15 years.
Yeah, and speaking of another air show that I grew up going to, we have Blackpool on this list, but I personally don't think it will die. I think it will just sort of ease it a bit on what's attending. It's never really been one of the air shows that has all these crazy aircraft that you never see attending any air shows ever. It normally has just the sort of default stuff for a British air show. It has the Wing Walkers, the Typhoon, the Red Arrows, the Starlings, uh, Rich Goodwin in his pit special. You get the sort of default air show with Blackpool, and it is free. I personally don't think Blackpool Airshow will ever die out, purely because Blackpool as a whole is a tourist destination, and Blackpool Airshow brings in tens of thousands of people every year to a tourist destination where prices are already higher. And since it's funded by the council will probably take a cut of all profits earned during airshow times and put that towards the next display. And since it's a tourist destination, they're getting that money all the time from these tourists. But it has seen less and less activity since COVID. Um, you don't see as many like things on the ground, like the tents and stuff like that. You don't see as many. You don't see even as many people attending.
Yeah.
But Blackpool Airshow was the first ever airshow in the UK, and I hope it is one of the last. But it's another one of them sort of seaside air shows that are seeing a decline over time.
I mean, I just personally think that Blackpool will have the same fate as Bournemouth, along with Southport. I mean, I don't quote me on this because we never know until it actually happens. I mean, we didn't know that Bournemouth was going to go under until they confirmed it was going to be the last year of Bournemouth. But it's just the fact that the displays sort of get less and less each year. I mean, it's like a what, 4 hours, I think, or 3.5 hours of actual flying, and like Midlands is 6, and that's sort of a not. It's not like a middle air show, but it's like one of the. It's like a regular air show. That's what. I mean, that's sort of the bare minimum you should be seeing is things like the MiG 17 and these like sort of rarer displays. It's something that it's basically like the new Dunsford Wings and Wheels. So Midland started in 2021. It was either 2019 or 2021. I don't quote me on this. I'll put the date up on the screen now. But it's sort of carried on Dunsfold's legacy with these rare aircraft. So with Dunsfold, you just get like the P-40 Warhawks and like Ferocious Frankie that doesn't, like the Mustang that doesn't really fly at air shows anymore. Definitely not in the UK. You get the Vulcan. I mean, the Tornado went there. I don't think it went in the year I went, but yeah, it's just sort of the bare minimum at Midlands now. And I'm not saying that Midlands is a bad air show. Like I said, it's one of my top three favorite air shows that I've ever been to. But it just feels like places like Blackpool and Southport just are not at the golden age anymore. They are sort of in like the bronze age or like the stone age of sort of air shows, back to the absolute basic. And I think that people are going to lose interest over time of these air shows just because it's the same every year. I mean, there's only so many times that you can see the red arrows before they do get boring. I mean, I'm going to see them at, well, I'm not going to see them at Rio, but last year I saw them like upwards of 10 to 12 times. And by the end of it, I was like, okay, so the red arrows have been announced, but I'm not particularly looking forward to them. It's just more the fact that because it's so generic, people will get bored of it. And because, like you said, at Blackpool, there's not that many tents. So usually my family likes to walk around in the morning, take turns to go look around. And at this one, we were like, where's all the tents and stuff at? Because there was like an army tent and like the Air Force and Navy and that sort of stuff. But there wasn't really any commercial tents. So at Midlands, you'll have people selling models, which is where I've got a lot of the models in my display cabinet from. And I mean, if I get them here actually, so this is from Midlands. This is from Midlands. This is from Midlands. This is from Midlands. This is from Midlands, and this is also from Midlands, and that's just the cars. That is just the cars that I've bought from Midlands. That's not the planes, and that's just what I had on the hand next to me here. So yeah, you can sort of see what I mean when I say that there is no tense or sort of funding going towards the council that are paying for this, just because of the lack of, uh, you know, purchases being made in the grand scheme of what an airshow should be making. Midlands will make like probably twice, if not triple, the amount that Southport would make and Blackpool would make, because it has a lot of these sponsorships and revenue, and just it just has everything there. Like if you want to go to get a pair of sunglasses, you can go get a pair of sunglasses. If you want to get some plane models, you can get some plane models. If you want to get some wine, you can go get some wine. You know, anything that you want is basically there. It's like Amazon if it was made into an air show. But things of Blackpool and Southport, and Joey can agree with me here, just don't have this amount of promotion and advertising and marketing is sort of the word that I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, I think the most you will get at Blackpool. I know I bought a Spitfire bullet. I don't know where it is at the minute, but I bought a Spitfire bullet. Um, that was 2024. They had a Spitfire on the ground on the promenade, and you could buy Spitfire bullets. But even then, they were only like £5, and the sort of most you'll get other than that is like a burger van, or
Yeah.
maybe even an ice cream. But you don't see like you said, like wine or car models or plane models. You see like some army tents where they have like a reaction time test. We did that at Blackpool. We were horrible at it,
Yeah.
but um, we did that at Blackpool. But there wasn't any marketing to be done there in terms of yeah, them bullets. There wasn't anything being sold. It was literally just a reaction time test. But Blackpool Airshow is one that is going to be an interesting one to watch out for the next couple of years because again, it is
And
free.
see what direction it
But
goes into. Yeah.
yeah, they might make it a paid thing, but I personally don't see how they would, just purely because there's so many hotels at Blackpool.
Yeah.
There's so many people who live right at the beachfront. There's so many people who work right at the beachfront. It would be basically impossible to shut
Yeah,
down
that whole
an
beach,
entire
yeah.
city, basically, and start charging people to go to their own house. I personally don't see how they would monetize it more than they already have unless they started selling like car models or plane models or t-shirts even. But I will be watching it over the next few years just to see, do they see less and less jets each year? Do they see even an increase in planes? That would be great. But they never really go for anything unique at Blackpool. I remember when we were there last year, the narrator, commentator was on about asking people to message him on Instagram any aircraft that they would like to see at Blackpool, and people were saying like the F-22 and aircraft like that,
Which you
and
don't even get a
we
Riyadh.
can't even get that at
Yeah.
Riyadh. Yeah, so we're not going to see that at Blackpool Air Show that only gets the Red Arrows Typhoon and the sort of it's sort of the baseline for an air show. If you can match Blackpool, you can be considered an air show, in my opinion. If you get more than that, that's even better. But Blackpool Airshow, I mean, it has the. I'm definitely biased in saying that I still find it as like one of my favorite air
Yeah.
shows. I know Riyadh definitely tops that, just purely because it's Riyadh. And I've only ever been to three different air shows in my life: Southport, Blackpool, and Riyadh. So I don't exactly have the biggest range of what I can go off of. But out of those three, I would say it's Riyadh, Blackpool, and Southport. And Southport's mainly at the bottom because I want to say mainly because of last year, but I didn't actually go last year, so it didn't affect me. But Southport is also a paid thing. It's not expensive. It's like £15 per ticket for any adult, and it's free for under 18s. But it's not expensive compared to some of these air shows like Riyadh, which is upwards of £100 per person. But that could be what is causing it to lose funding is just the fact that the tickets aren't expensive and less people are buying them because of its close proximity to Blackpool Airshow,
Yeah.
free. So it's sort of in an unfortunate spot and an unfortunate situation. They're sort of killing, it's sort of affecting both air shows in that aspect.
Yeah, and that's sort of the problem with close proximity air shows is if one's better than the other, then the one that's not as good as the other one will lose funding. No matter, I mean, you could put Southport tickets, like 35 quid or something, and but Blackpool because it's free and because it has better aircraft going there, you will not get as many people going to Southport Air Show. But yeah, it's I mean, like I said, like at Midlands and Blackpool, you can get things like this, but at Midlands you can also get models. You can also get model cars. There's just more marketing things that you can do. Like the army at Blackpool had the reaction time test, like Joey said. But at Midlands, they brought an airsoft gun where you had to like shoot the target. So when they're like lit up in your colour, you had to shoot them, and they had like that sort of stuff. And it's the stuff you don't see at Blackpool at Southport, and at Southport. I mean, giraffes on tour, where I got the Jeffrey giraffe from, or my Jeffrey. No, my Gerald. Their one's called Jeffrey. That goes to Little Grandson as well. I mean, it's just these coastal air shows that just don't get the right amount of funding, the right amount of marketing, the right amount of all this, and that's sort of the factors that lead to it dying, unfortunately. But there are other airports or air shows that we need to talk about. Things like Abington Air and Country Show. So it's not really an air show; it's more of a sort of flying. It's a very small time to. It's like a flying afternoon rather than an air show. You might get a few Spitfires there, maybe a few Hurricanes, maybe the BBMF, maybe the Red Arrows. But over the last few years, it has been dwindling in the amount of stuff that it has been receiving. Same with things like Farnborough, so that's turned pretty much into 100% into a business show now, rather than an air show. So I possibly might be going to Farnborough Air Show this year on the Friday. But it used to be 4 days of flying, and now it's one air show day, and the three others being business days. So Farnborough, another big air show, is gone. Joey, you mentioned Cosford's as well, another big RAF air show that is. It's not okay. Cosford definitely isn't as bad as the extent of Southport and stuff, but it is losing aircraft every year.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about the variety of aircraft is what brings people, and I think that's one of the biggest ones for React. If you look at these videos in like the 80s and 90s and even early 2000s, you're seeing not just a variety of aircraft, but a variety of what they're doing with these aircraft. They'll fly the most random aircraft you've
Yeah.
ever seen in one formation, and you just don't see that anymore. And even just the lineup for this year, I know it's still got weeks left, but it's not been the greatest lineup so far. And there's not been as many flying displays as we've seen in other years. So unless the every takeoff Thursday from now on has multiple flying displays, we're
And
just not going
banging
to get as
displays,
many
not just
flying
like
displays.
regular
Yeah,
sort of displays. Yeah.
yeah, good displays. I know that the best one we've had so far, at least that I can remember, is the Turkish display team, which I am very excited to see. I've never seen them before, and they have a very cool new livery this year. Um, but that's sort of the only one of that sort of uh, quality, not quality, they're all pretty good, but that sort of display. Um, and you're just not seeing that on the most recent Takeoff Thursday, which actually came out today as a recording this, didn't even have any flying displays. So the next couple of Takeoff Thursdays are going to have to make up for that. And if they don't, there is going to be just less and less flying displays. But the variety is really what brought people to Riyadh, and it's
And
really
it's
what made it
dwindling
the
now.
best air
So
show. Yeah, it's dwindling. You're not seeing. I mean, the most prominent recent one was the wedge tail flyover with the red arrows, but that was one flyover on one of the days of the air show. And if you look back 20, 30 years, you see videos. There's an Su-27 flying with a Boeing 737 with a Hawker Hunter behind it, and you're just not seeing that sort of variety of formation anymore, and it's what's
Yeah, I mean,
the biggest to react.
if we told you at the start of a podcast about dying air shows, Riyadh was on there, you wouldn't believe us. You probably believe us now because the thing is, it's not dying in a sense, but it's getting worse and worse every year, in our opinion. Now, that's not to put React down. I'm sure they're doing the absolute best that they can to get as many displays, and I know in this day and age it's not easy, but it does mean that it is dying and getting a lot worse every year. Like I said, 2019 was probably the last best year of React, and that was 7 years ago now, maybe six if we take out 2020, but still 6 years ago since a at least good air show at Ria. I mean, I'm definitely sad that I missed out on some of the 2021, 2022, 2023 ones because they did look good. But I mean, it says a lot that the last one that people like the most is back in 2019. But it's just the variety just isn't there anymore. I mean, last year you were getting two or three flying announcements per week. This year we're getting maybe one every other week. It's just there's been more takeoff Thursday announcements than there has been displays announced for the show, and it's just I don't know. I mean, my friend Alfie, hello Alfie, hi, well, yeah, mention you here. Really good friend of mine actually, he has been defending Riyadh like the whole time, and I don't blame him. I mean, so do I. I mean, I haven't defended them, but I've said, yeah, I can see that maybe they might start to announce more things towards the end of like takeoff Thursdays. That's sometimes what they do. But then this week, me and him just went, yeah, no, this is not good. This is the end, you know. But yeah, it's probably the best one out of the list that we've got on here. It's the one that's dying the least, but for the air, relative to the scale of the air shows, it's probably one of the worst ones because you think Southport's a 4 hour, well, 3 hour is it what something flying display around that.
Depends on depends on the year, but it's usually around 4 to 5 hours.
Yeah, Blackpool's also 4 hours. Riyadh is like an 8 hour flying display usually. And I mean, when I went, it was from like 10 till 6, so that's 8 hours. And I think over the next few years, it might become maybe a 5 to 6 hour show, which for an international air tattoo, if it's having to compete with Blackpool Air Show, I think that says a lot about the status of the UK flying circuit.
Yeah, especially when you look at like pricing and stuff. If it's competing with Blackpool Airshow, that's a free airshow compared to a minimum £70 per ticket
Yeah,
airshow. They might drop the price, but with increased like costs of everything, which is another major factor for these airshows, is the economy, like the state of the global economy is just not as good as it used to be, which is just one of the main factors, especially things like jet fuel as well. That's increasing price, especially with the ongoing conflicts in the world. That's much more expensive to book displays because of the increased price in jet fuel. But Ria, I would say, has from its peak to now had the biggest drop on our
the
list.
biggest downfall,
Um,
yeah.
like just because of how good it used to be. It's still my favorite show. I'm comparing my 2025 experience to Blackpool and Southport. So compared to them, it is still the best air show I've ever been to. But
But I've been to
I just
loads
wish I
of
had gone to it a
displays,
lot
and
sooner. Yeah,
if I had to rate sort of like individual years of air shows, React 2019 probably would be in the top three. But overall air shows, so you know all the years combined and averaged out, and doing all the maths and what you know, let's not bring maths into air shows. But if like you know if we rate each one and then you know it has to be like I said, Dunsfold, Wings and Wheels, Sywell, and then Midlands, and then probably React maybe. But then even then, it's still competing with things like Little Granston. Little Grandson genuinely has more variety than Riyadh so far. Like, And that's just crazy to me to think that a little grass strip just like air show is genuinely competing with the biggest air show in Europe or the biggest air show in Europe. That is just so crazy to me. I just can't fathom the fact that it's gotten that bad. Um, and I think we're getting a bit carried away here, but I think you can see that we're letting our emotions be true and we're not trying to gatekeep what we really think.
Yeah, and you said that Little Grandson is competing with it, and that's just in variety. I mean, the quality of displays Riyadh has announced, like the Turkish display team especially, uh, you're not going to see something like that at Little Grandson. I mean, you might do, you might be very surprised in a week's time, but you're just not going to see things like that at these more local air shows, not an international air show. So that's the main thing that separates React from the other displays. It might not have the variety within the air show itself, but if you compare it to every other air show in the UK, it's just very different displays. That's probably one of the main things that will keep it going for a lot longer is relative to the other UK displays, it has variety, but if you look at it compared to, like we said, 20, 30 years ago, the actual variety itself is a lot smaller.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't even have to go to Riyadh to see the Eurofighter Typhoon. That's going to Little Granston, and I think that that says so much. The fact that you can go to these tiny little air shows and see things like the Eurofighter Typhoon. I mean, it just has such rare planes like the Tipsy Belfair, one of one, the DH9, one of one in England. You have like the Tiger 9 display team; they're always great to see. You have all these rare like the A26 Invader or the B26 Invader, whatever the name of it is, because I've seen too many different names to know what the aircraft's called. I've seen A26C, A26B, B26A, B26B. I've seen too many names to know what the blooming B26 Raider, Invader, whatever it is. But you see that at Little Granston as well, and it's just like I would rather see some of these aircraft than the aircraft that I've seen 500 times before because they're just rare. Like I don't really know what to say. It's just the fact that when I go to Little Grandson, I feel so much happier. And I'm not saying, Mum, if you're listening to this, please don't cancel our tickets to Riyadh. I still love Riyadh. It's just the fact that Little Grandson is just another amazing air show, and I honestly can't wait for this year. I'm sure it's going to be a banging lineup as it usually is.
Yeah, I think we are slowly running out of time, but luckily we have a bit more time to talk about stuff like this because our uh, announcements for air shows this
Very
week is just the
lackluster.
takeoff Thursday, which is just for static aircraft, which we'll get onto soon. So we have a bit more time than usual to talk about the main topic, but we did spend a decent amount of time talking about the news just because there was a lot of weather news
Mm.
and space news. Um, but a couple other dying air shows are like Torbay, Prestwick. I'm not sure if you mentioned some of these, but Farnborough, I think you misspelled
Yeah.
that one. But Farnborough Air Show. Um, just a lot of these air shows are just seeing less and less activity each year, less and less variety each year. Um, so I think within the next 5 or 10 years, we will start to see a couple of more air shows stop altogether. But we might also see, because some of them are stopping, some of the other ones that haven't might start to bounce back because there is more attendance from the people that would go to these other air
Yeah.
shows that now can't. I'm hoping that that's sort of what happens is a bounce back from uh, that decline in popularity. Not popularity, it's still popular, but the decline in variety in air shows. Hopefully, we see an increase in attendance and variety in the other air shows.
Yeah, I mean, we are running out of time, so I think we're going to sort of end it around here. I mean, the last point that I really have to make is just agreeing with you there and hoping that if some of these air shows like Southport do sort of close down, then more of the aircraft that would have gone to Southport go to Blackpool, and that becomes a bigger air show. And like things that because Eastbourne got a lot of the displays that Bournemouth used to have as well now, so it's in a way when one closes down, one gets a bit more popular, but we just don't want to see these air shows closing down, especially Sywell. I mean, Sywell, I can 100% see that. because like the lead guy who was pushing Sywell did unfortunately pass away due to an illness, so I can 100% see why that one didn't continue. But things like Dunsfold Wings and Wheels, they're focusing, like they haven't even started building yet on their like estate or whatever. So I don't see why they can't still be air shows. It stopped 7 years ago and they've still not started construction. I mean Riyadh. I mean, at some point I think me and Joey are gonna have to get in like Cessnas and do a little Cessna display at Riyadh. It's gonna get that desperate. But I mean, I'm trying to convince my mum to take me to Shuttleworth for one of the displays there. She's saying no at the moment, but I mean, I'm hoping that I can change her mind because that is another one that me and her both enjoy. But we are going to move on. But before we move on, I do want to give a few shout outs to a few specific people. So I do want to start off with Alfie. I mentioned you earlier. He is probably one of the biggest fans of the podcast. One of my best mates that I'll be seeing at Riyadh. Me and Joey will probably be seeing at Riyadh this year. So hello to you. My auntie Rachel, who is a avid listener. I think that's the right words for this to the podcast. She always gives me feedback every week that I really enjoy. So hello to you. Thank you so much for watching. Obviously, my grandparents as well. I've now finally figured out how to show them how to get onto the podcast. So whenever you see this, big shout out to you. Thanks for buying the merch. And obviously, my mum, who has been basically the driving force behind this, with making the merch and helping me with ideas for stuff. So, I mean, we will have an amazing guest on next week, and both me and Joey's like parents and friends have been helping us get questions for this very special guest that we're going to have on next week. But so yeah, that's the end of my shout outs. Joey, do you have any shout outs?
I don't know if my mum actually watches the full episodes, but I know she watches the promos. But if she isn't, if she's watching this, hello, shout out to my mum. Shout out to my cousin as well. He watches the promos. I'm not sure if he's figured out that those are just promos or not. We did have to put a
Make a
promo out
video out of
saying
that,
that
yeah.
those are promos because there was a bit of confusion with people thinking that those were the full episodes, even though we point people towards the full episodes at the end of the promos. We still had people asking us uh, about the promos being episodes. Um, but hopefully this podcast grows more. Hopefully we get more and more people interested in aviation. And like you said, the guest we have for next week is a great guest to have. We might start teasing it throughout the
Yeah.
week. Who knows? Um, but I can't wait for that guest, and neither can my parents as well.
Yeah, I mean, neither can mine really. I mean, can I give a shout out to your tutor? Your tutor seems to always be um, interacting with you and helping us sort of grow as a podcast. But I know we don't have many viewers, but the viewers we have, I cannot be more happy with. I mean, I don't post. So, like, for my photography, I don't post for views. I post because it makes me happy. That's the same with this podcast. I enjoy, like, the 2 hours or three, well, it's probably more like 4 hours that we spend in VC, like, scripting the podcast and recording it and sharing our passion with people and hoping that, I mean, even if if we make people get into air shows and it makes these air shows I mean, we might be with the guests next week. We might be hopefully helping them out in a small way to help people go to them. But don't want to tease it too much. So we are going to move on to the last section, which is going to be a very quick rapid fire section on Riyadh's Static Saturdays announcement, as Joey called it earlier. So Joey, do you want to take us through some of the
Yeah.
aircraft on that?
Yeah, so this is one of the I don't want to say worst takeoff Thursdays. Like I
But
said,
it
like you
definitely
said, I
is.
call it static Saturday to you, but it's definitely not the best. We have a KC-390 as a static from the Hungarian Air Force. We have an aircraft that I personally have never even heard of before, as an L410 UVP from the Lithuanian Air Force. I will be interested to see that one because I've never even heard of that before. Uh, a C-42C from the RAF Microlight Flying Association, and a DO-27 from a private owner. I'm not sure if that's a D0 or a
It's
DO-27.
Dornier. It'll be Dornier. So
Yeah,
I've seen the Dornier
Tony.
before. I'm not sure if it's that specific aircraft. I know it's the specific aircraft type, whether it is that specific aircraft that I've seen before. But there is a Dornier in the last dogfight, which is actually one of the first dogfights ever. But basically, it flies with a Piper Cub, and the story behind it is a true story. They shot at each other with pistols until the Dornier eventually went down. Basically claiming the Piper Cub mounted with a hat. Well, not even mounted. The guy pulled out a pistol out of his pocket that he just has on him, just in case, and started shooting. And they were shooting at each other. It's a cool story that is a real story, and I've seen it at many airshows before. But like I said, whether it is that Dornier specifically or not, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not the best takeoff Thursday this week, but hopefully the next coming weeks will be like just like 50 flying displays or something.
Yeah,
It's very unlikely
the
to
Greek
have
F4
like
Hellenic displays and
yeah.
everything and stuff like that. But yeah, I think we're going to sort of wrap up the podcast here. There's really not a lot to speak about with statics. I mean, I mean, I've never heard of that L400, whatever it is, thing before either. So there's not really much to talk about. I mean, me and Joey more enjoy talking about the flying displays because we can talk about the stats and stuff on this. There's not really much point talking about the stats of a static aircraft because it's not moving, it's not doing anything. So we are going to wrap it up here. We do hope you've enjoyed the podcast today. Shout out to everyone that we've shouted out today and mentioned. And yeah, it's a shame with the aircraft circuit. But before we end it, Joey, I'm going to let you do your 5 minute, 2 minute, whatever recap at the end.
Yeah, so it was a fairly packed news segment this week. We started off with the Ukrainian FPV drones taking out two Russian helicopters. We moved to the RAF Typhoon scrambling to intercept Russian drones. We talked about the tornado outbreak over the last sort of 8 days or so. We moved on to space news with the Falcon Heavy, Ariane 64, Atlas 5, and the mini Starship documentary, not to be confused with the mini Starship documentary.
Yep, yep.
Um, a bit of extra space news that has happened whilst we were recording this, but we'll talk a bit more about that next week if there's more information, is the uh, first ever Soyuz 5 launch, um, which is just the first launch of this type of rocket. But hopefully there'll be a bit more information on that next week. We then moved on to the normal aviation news with the RAF Rapid Fire, not Fire, we talked about the A330 rejecting its takeoff due to an engine fire. We talked about the man that was arrested after plane spotting in America. We talked about the F-16 demo plane that had to land after an emergency. We talked about the rerouting that the Israeli Prime Minister has to take to get to Kazakhstan. We talked about the plane crash in Australia, two fatalities after it crashed into a hangar. We talked about the 737 hitting a drone while landing. We then moved on to the main segment of the podcast where we just talked about air shows for an hour or so.
Yeah,
We talked about aircraft that no longer fly or barely fly in British air shows. We talked about air shows that no longer even
exist.
exist. We talked about Southport a lot, we mentioned. Um, we talked about a couple of other shows that we personally believe are dying. Dying is sort of a strong word, but
Ending.
sort of fading away,
Yeah.
yeah, ending slowly. And then we talked about the Static Saturday. Um,
Yep.
so it was quite a good week this week. Not so much for aircraft announcements, but in terms of it was a packed news segment and it was
Yeah.
a good conversation topic. And next week, I will be very excited to see next week.
Yeah, but that does end this podcast this week. I'm sure I'm not going to have any joys editing this, which is why I need to get an editor soon because I don't know how to edit really. I just sit there for an hour and a half cutting anything out that needs to be cut out, which actually this week isn't actually like anything. We basically did this in one attempt. I needed a toilet break in the middle, but other than that, we would have happily have done this easily in one attempt. So if there's any pictures that I need to add, then I can add that. But I mean, other than that, it's yeah. So we're gonna end it here. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you next
Fantastic,
week.
man.